Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 24, because this is about the end of the age. This is serious business, but let's take a look at some of the things that we might understand. Matthew chapter 24, the Olivet prophecy, and here's what the disciples, they're walking around there in the city of Jerusalem. They're there at the temple, and the disciples say to Jesus here in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him and called his attention to the buildings. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I think can help us to understand some things. In verse 1, this question is prompted about the end of the age, is prompted by the disciples' trust in the temple and the buildings. They're asking, look, Jesus, you don't seem to be paying attention to all the buildings. And we can put it this way, to all the institutions that we have here. These are lasting buildings. This is the temple. It has been there forever. This is, was it Bear Stearns or whichever one that went underwater? We think about the investment companies, corporations that no longer exist, things that we put such trust in. And of course, just a couple of years ago, we thought that these three were dead. Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. Institutions, gone. We thought were totally gone, and would have been gone if it hadn't been for a bailout. But how did that impact our country? It impacted our country greatly. People were overwhelmed by the prospect that large corporations like that could die. But to say nothing of financial institutions, if they had not bailed out, where they would have been. Scary thing. It gets overwhelming. You think, I just got a small pittance, as it were, in my savings account. But you remember the Great Depression. You didn't get any money out of the bank. The bank didn't have any money. You didn't have any money. You didn't have anything. It was all wiped out. One kind of fell swoop. You had a problem. So we live in a world, and they were looking at the institutions, trying to get Jesus to focus on the institutions there. They had a strong attachment and confidence in the institutions. And again, but they had a problem of focus. Here's Jesus' disciples asking him to pay attention to the institutions, the buildings. They had a misplaced faith. Jesus apparently was missing something because, again, they called his attention to this. Have you seen all of this? Have you seen what we have done? Have you seen what we have built for God? We have done this. We have made this building. Does God need that building to dwell in? Jesus could have said, he didn't say that. But then he goes on in verse 2 and he says, do you see all these things? He asked. And so again, here's the point. That sometimes we get overwhelmed because we think that certain things are sacred. And there can be no change. And sometimes those things get rocked. Like Old and New Covenant. Laws that were put into effect. Different things. And we think, it can't be any other way. You've got to take the woman out and stone her. That's the black and white of all of this. Jesus introduces some new thinking that really got them overwhelmed in incredible ways. So the sacred building, can it fall? But Jesus wasn't thrown by that. Now, we built a nice edifice in dedication to God. And many people were thrown by the fact that you could walk away from that. You could actually walk away from something that was dedicated to God and move forward. But Jesus wasn't thrown by it. Is this the first time the temple had ever come down? No. Was this the original temple? No. What was the first temple they dwelt in? A tent? God can, and Jesus wasn't thrown by that. We, though, as human beings, when things change like that, we get thrown by it. We get very scared by those things. So people tend to be overwhelmed by change of what they think or we think is permanent. We tend to think certain things are permanent. And yet we live in a world where we see that things have changed. We get very worried about a climate change. But we're people who recognize there was an ice age. There have been changes, all those things. Did God survive through the ice age? Apparently, thank you. Apparently he did. Were there dinosaurs on this earth before? Did God survive through that? Was there, in theological terms, in our understanding, was there a world before the flood where there were a lot of people on the face? Were there giants? You know, there were things that can change. There are things that can change. Was there a nation of Israel that God was center? Yes, there was. Where is it today? Well, we have a Jewish nation, but what about all the rest of them? You see, things can change, and things that we see as sacred, we have to recognize, again, that there can be some changes. So he's trying to help them to see and understand. He wasn't thrown by that. That's what verse 2 will help us to see. Verse 3. When we read verse 3, it says, again, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, they said, when this will happen and what will be the sign of your coming. Now here's what we find in verse 3, which again is a point where we get overwhelmed. Because this information that Jesus gave them was disastrous. It was absolutely disastrous information, and it was of overwhelming concern. And so when you find or get disastrous information and you're overwhelmed by that, what is the first question you ask? The first question is when. You want to know the timing. This is very, very important for us to understand as we walk through life. You know, is it now, Lord? You're going to do this right now? Remember what Jesus said to you, you adulterous generation. You know, you want to do this, you want to know the when, so you can go and do what you're going to do. I'm not giving you a when. But that's what the disciples themselves asked when. And how often, when, Lord? When are you going to do this? When is this going to happen? And that is followed by the second one. What are you going to do? We want to know the when, and we want to know the what. And the conclusion they were after is the end of the age. As if the end of the age is the end of everything. But what is the end of the age? Because people can't handle well the end of the age or an end of an era. How well do we handle an end of an era? Not well. How do we handle even the end of our own personal age? Usually not well. That we handle, or that there can be changes, we don't handle that well, because it brings us a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. But again, we have to ask, where is God in all of this? Verse 4, though, Jesus says, watch out that no man deceives you. Now, here's the other aspect that we find here. Deceiving world brings, again, a lack of trust, which is scary. Now, how much can you trust, or how much do you trust the world, and how much do you not trust the world? Well, we tend to trust our own world and our own way of thinking, one. We don't trust the world because it'd be interesting to figure out how many conspiracy theories that we have in the world today. So many. And how many people have their own personal conspiracy theories that, you know, they may be in a hospital, but they think that aliens have invaded them, the TV is talking to them, you know, there's things happening because people's mental health is off kilter. So there's all kinds of conspiracies out there. There is an incredible world of distrust.
Feeling the blues today, or tired of life already? Do you have questions about life, or need spiritual advice? We can help. Log on to worldwidechurchofgod.com or wcgfairfield.blogspot.com and stay connected to reality. The Worldwide Church of God in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto are located in the San Francisco Bay Area regarded as the most prosperous region in the United States. We believe Jesus Christ when he proclaimed in Matthew 6:24 that serving God is more important than serving mammon. We welcome everyone to come and worship and fellowship every Saturday at the times listed on your screen and on our website, worldwidechurchofgod.com.